Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I am Xavier Smith, and today I'm going to talk about sine and cosine transformations. So a little overview of them all. Standard form of sine and cosine is y equals a sine or cosine b times x minus h plus k. Our a is our amplitude, which is the height from our midline. Then b determines the length of a period. A period is 2 pi over b, so a period is the time it takes for a cycle to fully happen. So in sine, it is one of these. So this whole thing from start point to end point is 2 pi. So our period is 2 pi divided by b. So if our b is 2, then it's 2 pi divided by 2, and our period would be pi. If it's 1/2, it would be 2 pi divided by 1/2 is 4 pi. So as b gets larger, then our period gets smaller, and as b gets smaller, our period gets larger. Then we have our h value, which is our horizontal shift, and our k, which is our vertical shift. Scale goes along with period, so you have to have 5 points to fully graph sine, cosine, or tangent. Your first point is going to be your horizontal shift. Your second point is going to be 1/4 of your period plus your horizontal shift, because your period is the time it takes to get from the start point to the end point. So you have the start point, then you have to have 4 points. So we have this point up here, this point in the middle, this point down here. So 1/4 of your period is going to give you the maximum point. 1/2 your period is going to give you a point that's in the middle. Then 3/4 of your period is going to give you your minimum point. Then your full period is going to put you back at the start of the cycle again. So you have your horizontal shift, then your 1/4 time period plus horizontal shift, 1/2 times period plus horizontal shift, 3/4 times period plus horizontal shift, then period plus horizontal shift. But after you do horizontal shift and this second one of 1/4 times the period plus horizontal shift, you should start to see a pattern. Maybe on 1/2 you will, and then you don't even have to do this 4th and 5th one. You'll just see the pattern, and you'll create the scale of your graph. So let's quickly go over all of these. Amplitude. As we said, it's the height you go from your midline. Here, there is no vertical shift, so our midline is y equals 0. And normal amplitude, if you think there's a 1 in front of that sine, 1 in front of this cosine, it goes up 1, goes down 1, deviates 1 from the midline. So at our sine, if we put the a as 3, then we have y equals 3 sine x. So the 3 stretches all the y values by 3. So from our midline, y equals 0, it goes up to 3 and down to -3. Then, if we have cosine and we put a as 1/2, then we have y equals 1/2 cosine x, and that is a compression by 2. So our y's are compressed by 2. So they only go up 1/2 and down 1/2 from the midline. There is more on amplitude. You can have a negative amplitude, which will flip the graph. So we have y equals sine x, y equals cosine x again. Then if we say a is -1/2 on y equals sine x, then we have y equals -1/2 of sine x. So again, it only deviates 1/2 from the midline of y equals 0, but now all the y values are flipped. So instead of going up first, it goes down, and then it goes up, instead of going up and then down. Then y equals cosine x, if we say a is -3, then we have y equals -3 cosine x. So instead of starting all the way up at 1, we're going to start all the way down at -3. Then we're going to go up to 3 away from the midline again, then go back down to -3. So it just flips all the y points and then multiplies them by 3. Then we are going to talk about vertical shift, our k value. So y equals sine x. If k equals 2, then we have y equals sine x plus 2. What does that do? Well, it shifts the midline. So our k value is what shifts our midline, and the midline is the line we always come back to. So with sine, we start at the midline of 2, then go up to 3 because our a value is 1, then go back to the midline, then go down to 1, then go back to the midline at 2. So midline just shifts the whole equation up. Then y equals cosine x. if the k equals negative 3, then we have y equals cosine x minus 3. So we shift the whole equation down 3 units, and I would always advise drawing this dotted line because it tells you to go back to the midline. Do not go back to the x-axis. I have that problem a lot. Always go back to this dotted line because the x-axis is not your midline anymore. The whole equation is shifted down, so the x-axis is just not the midline. Now the midline is y equals negative 3. So starts at negative 2, goes down to negative 3, our midline, then goes down to negative 4, goes back to negative 3, our midline, and then up to negative 2. Now let's talk about phase shifts, or also known as horizontal shifts. This is our h value. So if we have y equals sine x and y equals cosine x, they always go 0, then pi over 2, then pi, then 3 pi over 2, then 2 pi, because those are our big 5 points on a unit circle. Now, if we say, well, sine x, if we say our h is pi, then we have y equals sine x minus h. Remember, it's a minus h in there, so it's minus pi. So when we put in a minus, we're really going to just be using this number, well, this, whatever you plug in the h is. So if this minus h here is negative, you move to the right. If it's plus h, then you're moving to the left. Because really, if it's negative, you're plugging in a positive, so you're moving positive over in the x values. And if it's a negative, you're really, well, if it's a positive, you're really plugging in a negative, so you're moving negative to the left. So we have y equals sine x, but it's just moved over where the starting point is now pi. So it's pi, then again, 3 pi over 2, then 2 pi, then 5 pi over 2, then 3 pi. All it does is you just shift it over pi to the right. You shift it over h to the right. Now, if we say cosine x and h is negative pi over 2, we have y equals cosine of x plus pi over 2. And as we were just saying, if this is a positive, you are moving to the left. So we move to the left, pi over 2. So we start at negative pi over 2, then just do what we normally do. Negative pi over 2, then 0, then pi over 2, then pi, then 3 pi over 2. Always make sure that from your start point to your end point, that it equals the period. So here we do not have a b value. We did not change the period. So this should be 2 pi from start to finish. So pi to 3 pi, well, 3 pi minus pi is 2 pi. Good. 3 pi over 2 minus negative pi over 2 would be 4 pi over 2 is 2 pi. Good. So we started at the right place, ended at the right place. So negative pi over 2, 0 pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. Then finally, period. And this comes along with scale, as we will talk about. So y equals sine x, y equals cosine x. Again, the period is 2 pi. From 0 to 2 pi, so the period is 2 pi. It takes 2 pi radians to go through a full cycle of sine or cosine. So if we say y equals sine x, now b is 2. We have y equals sine 2 of x. Remember, period equals 2 pi over b in sine and cosine. So we have 2 pi over 2, and now the period is pi. Oh, what does that mean? That just means we compressed everything by a factor of 2. So now this whole sine graph will happen in just pi radians. So it should be tighter, more compact. So instead of pi over 2 here, we have pi over 4. And the way to see that, again, is your first point is your horizontal shift, which we don't have a horizontal shift, so it's 0. Our second point is 1/4 times the period plus horizontal shift. No horizontal shift, so 1/4 times the period is 1/4 times pi is equal to pi over 4. So already I see a pattern. We have 0, then pi over 4. Well, I see we're adding pi over 4 for each point. So it goes 0, pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and then pi. Remember to end when you have 5 points. So pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and pi. Remember, first point of sine is always on the midline. Then it goes amplitude up. back to midline, amplitude down, back to midline. So that's what we have, and it's compressed compared to this. It's tighter. Now, if we take cosine and we said, well, what if b equals 1/2? Then we have y equals cosine 1/2 of x. So we plug that into 2 pi over b. 2 pi over 1/2 equals 4 pi. So that means our whole graph completes its cycle in 4 pi radians, which is double the normal sine and cosine. So if we think about what is our first point, again, no horizontal shift. So we do, our first point will be 0. Our second point will be 1/4 times our period. 1/4 times 4 pi is equal to 4 pi over 4 equals pi. So our first point is pi. Again, I see a pattern right away. From 0 to pi is add pi. So for every point, we're going to add pi. So it's 0, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. And then just remember, with cosine, you always start at the top from it's your midline to the amplitude. So you start at the top, the vertex, then you go to the midline, then down the amplitude, then back to the midline, then up to the vertex again. I hope that was helpful. Please comment if you have any more questions, and there will be videos on all of these individually if you need to go look at those for more help. Thank you very much for watching.